Greg, if I can put you on the spot, what advice would you give the White House if you were invited so to do? What would you tell them as they look on at that situation?
I would say stick with what you've done so far in terms of what you're saying. Leave off the I hate America, I hate Israel, because that's what Biden did in the second half of the speech. The Oval Office speech was necessary. It's a grave enough moment, and it deserves an Oval Office speech. He started with, we need to rearm, we need to look after our allies, we have to do the right thing, we have to defeat evil, all good. And he actually mentioned Iran, finally, which he had quite deliberately not mentioned the first 2 weeks. But then he went into the America is bad, we're inherently racist, Israel is not proportionate in the way they defend themselves, all that stuff, all that kind of, why are you down on America? America is a greater force for good. It's the greatest force for good in terms of defending the world. So stick with being positive about America, and we're going to do the right thing, and then you have to act.
But can you still stand by that, Greg?
Yeah.
After all these decades, after all these wars, after all of these millions of civilians who have died in every other corner of the world because of American foreign policy,
right?
Is it realistic to continue to say that America is a force for good and peace in the world?
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm not saying it just because I'm a patriot. Because if you look at
how can it be?
Because look at if we want to pick the biggest one of all, World War II, where the arsenal of democracy came to the rescue of the world, of the good.
Except it was the Red Army that defeated Nazism in Europe.
Well, yeah, we can get into the detail.
But to get back to the specifics, I mean, historically, correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't it been the assumed role of US presidents down through the decades of trouble in the Middle East to seek to damp down the fire,
right? And
rather than to encourage any kind of stoking of the flames? And Biden once again seems to be failing in that fundamental role of let's try and minimise the hurt here.
I think he's done some of that. He has said, let's beware, don't go in, let's wait for the hostages. I mean, I think their first impulse was to dial it down. And Blinken came out of the gates on that Saturday morning, and then they took down the tweet because they demonstrate weakness. And I think here's what I'm getting at. Yes, it's not perfect. It's an imperfect vehicle, the U.S. military. But it is the greater force for good. Do they make mistakes? Of course. But I'll look at the 80s, right?
I
the greater force for good.
feel that America or Britain are at all greater forces for good.
Yeah.
I now truly believe in my heart, this is my opinion, that any war that they go into is about making money. I don't believe it has anything to do with peace, because you've just got to look at the people who are in power and who benefit. Yeah. Those that benefited from Big Pharma, those that are benefiting from the arms deals, it's the people that are in power. It's a conflicted, it's sinister, and there's no way could you call it a force for good. Not in a million years. I'm so sorry.
Because the US
isn't America and the West committed to forever war? Isn't that the reality at the moment?
No,
because that's how they keep the balance sheets ticking over it.
Look what Mrs. Thatcher and Ronald Reagan did in the 80s. Defeated the Soviet Union without firing a shot. They fired some shots in El Salvador and Nicaragua. Yes, okay, there were some proxy wars going on, but really there was no, nuclear annihilation. This was, look, what Biden has done, and when presidents make these mistakes, and I think we can say that Israel has made this mistake more recently, is peace through strength. The best way to avoid war is to prepare for war. I'm not saying that Afghanistan was a good idea or Iraq was a good idea. I'm saying if you stay out of trouble but prepare for war, it's peace through strength, and that works. And when you don't do that, when you're too busy masking and taxing and creating scarcity, as Brett mentioned earlier, if you're too busy doing that instead of defending your country. We have 7 million illegals coming into the United States. That means the government has fallen down on its primary role, which is to defend the borders, defend your citizens. And the best way to do that is with demonstrable military strength. I'm not advocating using it unless provoked.
But how can you come back from people like Blair, who took us to war on a lie? You know, how can we come back from that? I agree with you, but you've got to have your strengths, but not when you're using those strengths on lies to make money.
I wish I had the crystal ball all the time, but we didn't.
I don't think there's any way out of the bigger mess until we actually do admit to ourselves as the West that we, the people, have been oblivious or misled and misguided by our apparent leaders, that it's been one war after another, and we were told it was about the defence of democracy or it was about this, that or the next thing, when in reality I think the balance sheet shows that these wars have been provoked and prosecuted to make money for the people who always make money out of war. And I think the days of declaring that America and the West are the force for good in the world, we've got to move on from that. I still think
maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying that there are people that profit from it. But thank God we have it. Because if we didn't, we'd be speaking German or Russian, or there'd be more of the carnage.
No, I'm going to have to jump in back because we have another break that's upon us. After which, and finally at the end of the show, we'll be getting to a look at the career of 1966 World Cup winning legend Sir Bobby Charlton. Stay with us. Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live, where, as always, we have too little time to air the opinions and get to the meat of the matter. However, we're discussing the Middle East. Greg, if I can come back to you, don't we also have to face the fact that it's a profoundly different world now? You know, the Arab world it's not completely united, but it's more united in many ways than it has been in the past when confronted by the West. You've got, Turkey has 2 million fighting men, ready to do whatever they're called upon to do. We've got, 130,000 Hezbollah rockets, pointed to wherever they're pointed.
Yeah.
America cannot realistically face up to the threat that's out there now in the old traditional way.
Well, the best way is to have alliances and friends and allies. I mean, obviously, America can't do it all. And it might have been more capable of that a generation or two ago, but not anymore. So I think, I'm not saying that America should make the decisions and police the world and police the seaways, but I think that what we saw in the last 2 weeks or maybe the last 2 years is people are finally seeing what a world looks like without American deterrence.
Okay. What do you think then, Tony, of that? Are we seeing the world without the American deterrence? And if so...
No, I don't think that's the reason that we're seeing this world. I just don't see...
Yeah.
I think that if Britain and America hadn't have stepped in and muddled water that they had no business being in, we wouldn't be in this situation. I completely agree with having enough military power to defend ourselves, but we will never have enough military power where we keep poking at other people's wasps' nests.
I would much rather do it through economic cooperation. The Abraham Accords, great example. We saw that during the Trump years. We were on the verge of a deal between the Saudis and the Israelis. That would have been fantastic.
That's why this timing is so sinister.
Still need to carry a big stick. And I think that, hopefully there will be this thing won't grow beyond the conflict the way it is right now. There's a great risk that it will, and nobody wants that. But I still would argue that the deterrence, or the lack thereof in the last 2 years, is what gave the opportunity for these evil people to do what they did.